Welcome to Strain on the Game, the podcast that reveals what it really takes to keep elite footballers performing at the highest level. I'm Stephen Warnock, former Premier League player, joined by physical performance expert Adrian Lamb. From training ground truths to the financial impact of fitness, we discuss the often overlooked challenges behind the beautiful game. This week, we are thrilled to be joined by England's head of nutrition and performance, Dr. Chris Rosimus, and one of his lead performance chefs, Dave Pyle. This is the one that we've really been looking forward to, given how critical nutrition is to fueling the best of the best. So, it's great to have you here, guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Well, first and foremost, thanks so much for inviting us on the show. It's great to be here and great to be here with my colleague Dave as well. So, like Dave, this is what me and Dave going to work well together. Very unconventional route into performance nutrition. So, I left school at 16, and I can honestly say, without giving you my life story here, but I had no real ambition in terms of higher education whatsoever. You know, my dad's a gas engineer, my brother's a gas engineer, and I knew I was going to go straight into that. So I didn't really do so well in school, didn't really apply myself that well because I was always going to work for my dad. And then I did that, and quite clear after six months it wasn't working. My dad made me go to a job centre and get a reality check. And to cut a long story short, I ended up falling into a role as a security engineer, doing CCTV, burglar alarms, that kind of stuff. And I loved that. But I got into football coaching. I've always played all my life. Recently just finished, and I coach now in Sheffield. But I started doing my coaching badges, coaching in my local community. I had a real sliding doors moment where a friend of mine was just begging me to help him on a Sunday morning, coach local kids. And I didn't want to do it. And I said, I'll do it this once. And after that, I was kind of bitten by the bug. And then it was through doing my coaching badges, my level 2 in particular, there was a small module on nutrition that really seemed to spark something inside me. So I started eating better, you know, to help my own performance as a footballer, amateur footballer. And then I realised that at 23, I didn't want to be an alarm fitter all my life, and I wanted to be a performance nutritionist. So I went back to school. You know, I had to kind of do an access course because I had no A levels. I had to really start at the bottom and then built my way up. And because I was involved in coaching at the same time, it was really helpful. I was coaching at Manchester United school, and I started becoming a nutritionist and a football coach at the same time. And my experiences just built from there. And then once I graduated, I kind of built my experiences. I had a year in the Middle East with Manchester United as a nutritionist coach. And from there, I just had a very, very clear vision where I wanted to go. And I ended up finding my way into an English Institute of Sport to look after the English cricket team. And I stayed there for 6 years, which was incredible, really. Going from where I'd been to looking after the England cricket team was a huge step, but it was an unbelievable experience. And then through that, I just built my experiences. And before I know it, I was involved at Leicester, Villa, Forest. And then for the last 8 years, I've been leading the nutrition team at the FA. Unconventional journey.
Incredible. And what about you, Dave?
Yeah, so started off in kitchens in Liverpool, worked my way up. I kind of always saw it a bit like a game of chess where I was always trying to sort of, jump from one, I learned kitchen experience in one kitchen. I'd go to a Pan Asian restaurant, learn some bits there. I never really knew where I was going with it, but then I sort of, kind of all sort of tied in the end kind of thing. So then I found, got a phone call from Liverpool, do you want to go there? Went there and I thought, wow, this is it kind of thing. And then, the nature of football kind of got chewed up and spat out a little bit to an extent. And I kind of left there and I thought, well, it's sort of where do we go from here? And then that's where the job came up on LinkedIn, spoke to Chris. He didn't give me the job. Gave it to someone else instead. But he phoned me up and said, do you want to be a bank chef? And I kind of thought, well, that's me being palmed off a little bit. But, we'll see how this goes. But ultimately, it's worked out perfectly for me because obviously that's led to, rather than being pigeonholed with one team, it's kind of seen me go all the way through the FA, and I've done every age group possible. So it's been perfect for me.
So what was the role that you actually went for, Dave?
The under-21 chef.
Okay.
Which, ironically, I'm now the under-21 chef. But
I was going to say, because that's how I actually met you, isn't it?
Yeah.
We met in the summer, and we were out in Slovakia, and obviously the team had great success. And went out one night just for a catch up and to meet. And obviously, yeah, I obviously got in touch with you after that. And yeah, it seems like it's worked out nicely for you then.
It has. All falls into place in the end, doesn't it?
It was all part of the plan.
Brilliant.
No, yeah. I mean, I'll give Dave some credit. I knew when we interviewed him, I had to hire him in some way, shape, or form. But it was, in the end, it's worked out brilliantly. I mean, I don't mind saying, Dave, amazing to work with, a real asset to us at the FA. And we'll sure we'll get into it in this talk. Absolutely integral. The performance chef team that I've got, absolutely integral to what we do.
I've been genuinely looking forward to this for weeks. Find this area of performance absolutely fascinating. And you'll remember from when we worked together when you were a player, the level of importance that I attached to nutrition was always incredibly high. And the reason for that was because as a fitness coach, it supported and it underpinned everything that I wanted to do with the players. It fueled the training performance. It certainly fueled matchday performance. It drove all of the recovery processes, which when we get into those situations where there's a lot of games in a short period of time, getting that bit right is crucially important. We spoke a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, about cognitive function and the effect that nutrition can have on how effective the player's brain is working in terms of decision making and concentration and focus for 90 minutes, which it's massively dependent on nutrition. So all of these things are hugely important to a successful team. And one of the things I always said to players was, look, you can train as hard as you want, but if you're not supporting that training with good fundamental performance nutrition, then that training stimulus is getting lost a little bit, and we're not driving those performance adaptations that we want to with the players. So you might get a little bit faster, and your performance may well improve a little bit, but not to the level that it would if we were supporting it with good nutrition. So in that sense, that having a performance nutritionist, first of all, but also really important, having a performance chef on the staff who can deliver performance nutrition in a creative and imaginative way, creating food that players actually want to eat and isn't bland and isn't boring, is hugely, hugely important. So in that sense, Chris, one of the things I wanted to ask you is just a basic overview of what your week looks like when you're in camp, how nutrition is planned, what level of detail you go into alongside the coaches, and just what your day-to-day responsibilities are, really.
Yeah, you've summed it up there, Adrian, really. And that's that
podcast over then. Thanks for coming.
It's, and this is what, first and foremost, the performance nutritionist can't be effective if they don't coexist with a performance chef, first and foremost. So it just becomes words and education that's not underpinned by something that they can actually do. So that relationship is absolutely critical. And then when I look at it, if you look at a 10-day camp or a 10-day week, we're really fortunate at the FA, actually. We've got me who oversees strategy. We have consultants on the ground who can do the on-the-ground delivery and coaching, and we've got chefs making it all work. So that three kind of lenses on nutrition makes delivery really deliberate and really impactful. And when you look at your week, it's really simple. We have a philosophy called the other 22 hours, and everything is around those. There's either 2 hours on the pitch at match day, or there's 2 hours around training. So what you do around those other 22 hours are absolutely pivotal, and you're either fueling or recovering from something on a various date. That's it. No matter what day it is, you're fueling or recovering from something. You're either fueling and recovering from something that's really high demand, high workload, or something that's lower, or you're recovering from what you did the day before. So that once you're really clear on that, that straight away drives what the nutrition interventions or menu or advice would be for that particular day. So we've got a really good system that makes it so easy. And for a role like mine, you've got to empower all of the staff. It's not just me, Dave, and the nutritionist. It's everyone's got to be on board really to a point so that they can live and breathe this area. So all of our performance staff, they're all well versed with this concept of the other 22 hours, and the culture of fueling and recovery becomes all part of the day to day. So like the way we break it down, you've got performance at one end of the week, and you've got the build up, and you've got a recovery. So we call it the 3 R's of the other 22 hours. You either reacting from something, so there's a session or a game, so you're in that react mode. So it's quite acute, where that takes a different type of nutrition. For example, if you're recovering after a game, it's all about how can we kind of refuel and replenish. So you're starting to look at carbohydrates and protein slightly differently in terms of cycles of that. And then once you move to day after, that match day +1, that's what and +1 and +2, generally that's what we call the recharge mode. You're recharging, ready to go again. So that's where we look at food in a slightly different way. We might then start to taper the carbohydrate and protein slightly differently, and then look to bring in more anti-inflammatory, antioxidants, polyphenols, because we want the muscle to become fresh and you want to recover. Because in 72 hours, you potentially got to go again. And then we have the refine days, which is anything which is kind of match day kind of -1, which is all about, from a nutrition perspective, it's all about building up the glycogen levels and stores, lowering the protein down, and it's all about carbohydrate. And what me and Dave, what I say to all my chefs and all my team is that what we're looking for is the tactical fuel advantage. That's our strap line, because nutrition, every club's doing nutrition around in the country, every nation's doing it. But I think the way we look at it, and if you're very deliberate about it, and you really emphasize certain things, and you look at it in certain ways, then it can give you a tactical fuel advantage, and that's what kind of drives us, doesn't it, Dave?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I'm kind of the boots on the ground. Quite often I'm implementing these strategies, but there's nothing wrong. Like, again, Chris is kind of the umbrella who, between us, the PPC, the PPC performance coach, and we work together, and underpinned with that sort of philosophy.
So what does your week look like then, Dave? So obviously you're having to, whether it's a camp away from where you are, so you're not in St. George's Park, or you're away from home, how early do you have to go out and prepare for a week away?
Normally I'll get there a day or two in advance, and then it's just making sure that, the menus that are pre-planned and we've spoken about and been signed off by Chris, for example, and we've got a basic schedule outlined, so we know that we can, we're periodizing it right for the demands. We have spoken to the S&C coach and made sure that, that it kind of all fits in. And then, I get out there about a day and a half, 2 days in advance, and then just sort of start implementing things.
Should you all sit down together? So the strength and conditioning coach, do you, Dave and Chris, both sit in the room together or be on a phone call and discuss what that week is going to look for? So I'll put that to you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it's different at each team, each level. But generally speaking, so like the under 21s, for example, we know what the schedule looks like. We kind of know the cadence of the week and where the pinch points are. And then that's where then Dave plans a menu. Dave has all my trust to plan a menu. Then we'll look at it together and start to make sure it's definitely aligning, because we also have to make sure, and this is part of our menu planning, whether it's for a major tournament or a camp, that but we've got to get the balance right with menus between what's technically correct, and I always say this to Dave, versus what's good for the camp as well. That's equally important. There's a time and a place. If you're in a tournament for 6 weeks, if it's just boiled chicken and rice all the time, that's not going to go far. So you've got to really, and that's where I bring that level of check and challenge. Look at Dave's. Okay, what's technically correct? What do we might need to tweak, and what's good for the group, and what day, if it's a high recovery day, for example. But yeah, that's what we do. There's always a process. So 4 weeks out of camp, new planning starts, and there's various iterations, and we get in touch with the host hotels, engage them in it. The logistical part of it, is absolutely massive. That's what they don't teach in university. There's a stakeholder in Georgia who's dependent on to help Dave deliver this menu. So they've got to be brought into this process. What can be sourced locally? What we've got to bring ourselves. So then it becomes there's many layers to it that take time to plan.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got to take loads of things into consideration. So climate. So if we're playing a tournament in Indonesia, all of a sudden, a big part of what you're looking at is hydration, cooling methods. How can we, even just for training sessions, how can we make sure that they're at their peak for a training session? So it's not just breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It goes deeper than that, and that's what, it's the beauty. Part of the beauty of it is that we've got to find those little gaps where we can, make the players in the best position for them to perform.
So how does it work with, so say for a talking sake, the England under-21s or the senior team, and you go away on a camp and they've got their menus that they're used to eating at their clubs. How does that differ? Do you speak to the clubs and see what they're having, or do you speak to the players, or do you just go, no, we do our own thing and that's what we think's right?
Yeah, so we have another nutritionist, Mike, who is on the ground with the seniors, and he will liaise where identified players have got a particular work on with a club. Then we'll work with that club and that player to try and facilitate their needs on camp. But as regards the menu that we prepare, that's an England menu, and it's really broad, it's really balanced. It's got all the options, so you can periodise it to any need within the camp. We're in a 26 kind of man squad. All needs can be catered for. But when you get down to that individual level, that's where that individual just on-camp coaching comes in place. But there will be a process beforehand where there'll be a conversation with a club and a said player just to make sure plans are aligned.
Just on that then, Chris, a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast will hear, carbohydrates and proteins and whatever. Can you just give like a broad overview of the content in terms of how you're actually delivering carbohydrates? What are the food choices that you're sort of going towards, both through the training week, but in and around pre-match as well?
Yeah, so and Dave will jump in here as well. We do kind of periodise the options based on what we're trying to achieve. If it's Matchday -1, and that's all about having easily digestible carbohydrates that are relatively low in fibre that the players can eat and digest and eat quite a lot of them, because we want them to eat anywhere between 6 and 8 grams carbohydrate per body weight, which, if you're 6'5", 6'6", that's getting up to 500 grams of carbohydrate. So you've got to try and break that down and, excuse the pun, in a really digestible way. So that's where foods on the -1 will be more kind of white rices, various gnocchis, pastas, pancakes in the morning that have really more good bang for buck in terms of carbohydrate. Bagels, for example, where there's 50 grams of carbohydrate in a bagel, where there's 10 to 15 in a slice of white bread. So you're trying to put options on the menu that are carbohydrate dense, relatively low in fibre, so they're getting the fuel that they need. And then there's an education piece then around actually starting to lower your protein, because if you're eating a high level of protein, then it's going to interfere with carbohydrate absorption, so you might not potentially get the carbohydrate that you need. And then when you look at your different days, we talked about the recharge and the react days. That's where you put different carbohydrates in. Then you might have them all low, medium glycemic index carbs earlier in the week. So your brown rices, for example, and Dave does some great stuff with that. So it's got to be driven by, I guess, what's the goal, the proximal to performance, and then you play with it that way. And that's where then the chef makes it come alive.
Yeah, and I think as well, Matchday -1, like Chris said there, it's pastas, it's gnocchis, it's, pancakes, apple crumble, rice pudding, we are loading them up.
Yeah,
I guess one potential problem that we do face sometimes is like early kickoffs, for example. Like, how do you get a player to have a big bowl of pasta, which potentially is what they need at breakfast time? But then you've got to be clever around that. So maybe it is, ideally, maybe we'd get rid of the eggs. But if you tell a player that you can't have eggs for breakfast in the morning, sometimes you'll get a bit of pushback, and that can affect morale. And it's a bit more nuanced than just what's best for them. So
yeah,
we put out, your Bircham mueslis, we'll put your porridge out, but some of them just won't go for that. So then how do we then make them have eggs, but also up the carb intake? So is it putting potatoes on the breakfast? Is it pushing bagels rather than the white sliced bread? Is it,
juices
juices, fruit juices? Is it pancakes and some caramelized banana? There's lots of different options. There's always avenues and techniques. It's just finding that little.
So how do you manage that then, Dave? So I'm guessing you're the one on the floor when you go into the major tournaments and you're watching. How are you monitoring what the players are having? Or are you just trusting?
I guess a lot of it is through communication with the players, so building rapport up and, you know, relationships and talking to them and seeing what they're having and giving gentle nudges, really, you know, sort of saying to them, you know, do you want it on, if I'm making an omelette, for example, I might say to them, do you want it on a bun or a bagel? Sort of, you know, what can I do to up the carbs? It's about positioning strategically on the buffet. Are the carbohydrates around the omelette station for them to have an uptake on that? You know, if they're having pancakes, am I making the pancakes live for them and then piling them up and stacking them up so that they're having 4, 5 a piece rather than just grabbing 2? And then can I tempt them with some caramelized banana and berry compote as well, and the maple syrup and the fruit juice?
But also as well, Dave.
Can you do a shake at breakfast? You know.
Sorry, Dave. You'll also be armed with information about the player, won't you? So I'll work with Mike, and there'll be individual fuel plans, won't there, with data for the players. And this is a performance chef. A chef's not an isolated chef just cooking great food. It's part of the performance conversation. So on the ground, the plan that I'll send to Mike, you'll then get sight of that, Dave. So when the player comes down to the buffet, you're just going to, okay, we know about that player might need a bit more of this. And you're subtly nudging it that way.
Yeah. And I think that is the key, isn't it? It's knowing the players. Some players aren't necessarily open to nudges. Some are really open to nudges, and it's about building that rapport with each player and helping them out.
So what would a typical match day meal look like? So if you're talking about, I know it's a little bit different with international football because predominantly that's played in the evenings, isn't it? So if we did go for, say, an 8:00 kickoff, what would the day look like? Would it be quite heavy in terms of food up until a certain point, or is it just being structured with it?
I'll kick off, Dave, and you can chime in. What's technically would be right is that you'd probably load up earlier and taper as the day goes on. Because last thing you'd want is to be overly full when you get into kickoff. So you'd try and, it might be 8 hours between wake up and a game. So when that first meal comes, you want them to kind of eat a bigger breakfast then and start to taper it down. But like Dave said, players might have different routines there. And that's where then Dave kind of makes it work. But you're trying to be discouraging some of the hard to digest foods that as a rule. But then it's finding it's working with the players. And you'll know for yourself, Steve, when you've played, there'll be certain routines on that match day that are difficult to shift, whether it's technically correct or not. So then is the juice worth the squeeze kind of thing? That's where you've got to figure that out. That's the craft of coaching. We're all coaches at the end of the day, whether it's coaching football or coaching nutrition. It's understanding the time to push and pull. But you like to think, well, the way we try and plan the menu, that generally speaking, that the right option will be generally made through what's available and how it's presented.
One of the pinch points that I often had was when usually the manager, put on a compulsory breakfast. What's your views on making meal times compulsory? Because a lot of players felt they needed that longer time in bed. And where does that decision lie now? Is it more you educating the coaches and the management, or dealing with the players? Or just describe how that looks for you.
Well, I think I'll always look at it first off, what's technically right. I always come back to that. So if just cutting a breakfast out remove a really key fueling opportunity. So you look at that. Sometimes it might do. So you might have a conversation to say, I advise you're missing an opportunity here and the risk is potentially this. Or sometimes, Dave, you might be able to let that one slide. You look at the time of the day, you might be able to let that one slide. And I think that it's ultimately, we've got a really good performance team who can have good conversations with a healthy environment is one where you can have a two-way conversation. And I think I would say England have that. Dave's on the front line in the kitchen, you'll see more of the actual, what that looks like in terms of behaviours. But I think there's a line to cross. If you believe that window shouldn't be compromised, you think you've got to be confident enough to have that conversation. But also knowing, like I was saying, when's it okay? When can I pull it? What will I get more back if you kind of let this one go? And I think you're always having that dance, really.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask about the level of the players' knowledge now of nutrition and hydration and things like that, because this will probably surprise quite a lot of people who listen to this and my career, but I didn't find out until I was 33, 34 that I was actually dairy intolerant and had a few problems. And I used to cramp a lot, and everyone used to think, oh, why? he's just unfit. He's just not very good at what he's doing, and he's getting older and things like that. But it wasn't. I went for an intolerance test, or had an intolerance test, and I was actually on holiday and spoke to the lady on a Zoom call, if you like, and was sat there with an ice cream, and the first thing she said is, "You might want to put that down." And I just think the game's evolved so much now. Is that, are you noticing that with players now?
It's hard to say really, to actually, because we don't really assess knowledge per se, so it's hard to say objectively what players' knowledge is coming in. We do try down the path where we have looked at knowledge profiling around the key areas that we believe are important. So,
do players quiz you as to why they're going to eat foods, or what will give them bigger benefits?
So in my career, absolutely. I mean, I've had that, for whether that was football, cricket, or when I was with the Lionesses. You get very curious players. Some players, I think, can be quite passive and don't ask you any questions. But yeah, absolutely. Like, if you're offering a supplement to a player, I've had to, at times, actually get the whiteboard out and start showing the player a little bit of the science of why I think they should be taking X, Y, and Z. But within a squad of 26, it's very different. So you do get that, and I think that it's your job as a nutritionist to be able to have a really good balanced conversation with anyone, irrespective of the level of knowledge, and find a way to make them understand it. I mean, that's the skill of it.
Yeah, I think the reason I asked that is because we had Dr. Steve McNally on our previous episode, or one of the previous episodes, and he was talking about Cristiano Ronaldo and talking about him being an absolute student of what he was putting in his body. And you just think, is that the next level? Is that the details that the best players in the world go to understand when to eat, how to eat, what food groups work together? Because often we are reliant on chefs, nutritionists to be able to do that for us. But when you step away from an environment of a tournament or being away for a week and you're at home, do you then know what you're doing?
Yeah.
Chris, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that I think it's difficult in a team environment to offer that level of tailored service kind of thing. I think you get players who are keen and who want that sort of level, and we can do it. But I think, Cristiano Ronaldo is an exception, where maybe with his private chef, that's what he's looking for. But I think for me, fundamentally, it's more about the team and the group and making sure they've got everything they need.
So Dave,
you do get
perform.
it.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris, you go.
Yeah, just looking back, but you do get it. You do get players. I've been in scenarios where I've been weighing players' food with them, like the day before a game, and I love that because I'm a person that likes certainty. So if I'm saying to someone you need to eat 6 grams per kilo, for me, there's only one way to know that, and let's weigh it. So we'll be really clear. So I like that, but not everyone does. But yeah, you've just got to be, you've got to be ready. You've got to have the tools ready to react when it does come, because you will, over a span of a career, you'll get players who want to go to the nth degree.
Dave, when you've been, I know you've done private chefing as well, haven't you? You don't have to name names of what you've done, but what do you do when you go into a household of a player? How does that work?
So I think that's more along the lines of what, Cristiano Ronaldo's after. So I can, give him, I can periodize the menu. I can, if it's recovery, if he's injured, I can give him what, I've bounced ideas off Chris before around injured players, and said, can I give liver and, this and that, and what, it can be far more specific. I think with the team and the group, I think, if me and Chris are there together, we can obviously weigh food out, portion it, get through it quite quickly. But if I'm on my own on a camp in a tournament, it's difficult to go to that level for one individual player, because the other 20 will be waiting a lot longer and potentially going and getting other items without me serving them, kind of thing.
But it can be done though. We have done things in the past in different groups where we've actually, on Matchday -1, had stations to weigh food out where players have had individual carb targets, and we've put context cards next to each carbohydrate, and we've said X amount of grams of this will give you X amount of grams of carbs. And we've had scoops that just when you scoop it, it weighs it. In groups I've worked with in the past, we've got to that level, which is great, because you're just doing it on that one day. And it all depends how you've got to frame something like that up over a period of time. You just come in straight away with that. That could be like, it's going from 0 to 100 very quickly.
Yeah.
But when I was working with a group and you educate them and you drip feed that in, you say, right, to get to the next level, now I think we probably need to look at this. Then you get that buy-in. But again, like you're saying before, that comes down to that coaching.
Dave, I was just going to say, you just touched on something there, and I was fascinated when you said it. Was when a player's injured, I'll feed them differently.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What are you looking at there? Because I mean, that's something completely new to me now. I'm thinking, what are you feeding them, Dave?
Well, I mean, it all depends, doesn't it, on the injury as well. But I mean, it might be that you cut down on the carbs, up the protein. It might be that we, again, I've bounced ideas off Chris before, and I mean, do you give them bone broth and collagen, or is that a load of nonsense? There's different theories around different things, but I mean,
so what would that sort of be implemented for?
So, Chris, what's your thoughts on collagen?
So this is now where the chef and nutritionist work well together, because now I can look at the science of these things and say, right, how can this apply? So let's say a player's got Achilles tendon injury. So the tendon is just cross-sectional areas of the tendon, and there's very little blood flow that gets into that area. But it's collagen, essentially, and it requires vitamin C and collagen together to help nourish it. So there's protocols out there, and this is then where you work with someone like Adrian, the S&C and the rehab, and line it all up. So if part of that individual's rehab plan is to do some kind of skipping exercises in the morning to try and kind of give a stimulus to that tendon, taking a bone broth or a collagen jelly that Dave's made 45 minutes before, that can get into the bloodstream. So as that kind of lengthens and shortens that tendon, it can start to draw in the collagen and the vitamin C. And what you see over time is that the cross-sectional area, that tendon comes back growth. So then your return to play time can start to be accelerated. And then, as you know, in our game, if you can get someone like yourself back training quicker, there's clear benefit to that. So that's where you start to use nutrition. Or let's say I've had players in the past, previous sports, broken leg, immobilized for a period of time. The one thing will happen, that leg will be muscle wastage. That will happen. So when you come back to returning to play, our goal as a nutrition is to minimize that muscle wastage. So the way to do that is have a significantly higher protein intake. So there will be wastage, but you can mitigate that through that. And you can bring stuff in there like creatine that can help with that. And then you're looking at calcium, the bone density, you've got the vitamin D. So it's when you come back, you're still going to come back in a suboptimal state, but the gap isn't that big. So
Chris, I think you've described there a really interesting aspect of the way that nutrition has advanced and the thinking around nutrition has advanced in the performance environment, where previously when a player got injured, the only thing that was being contributed to from a nutritional standpoint was we've got to minimize body fat accumulation. We've got to actually now when a player is in that acute phase of injury, having the physiotherapist, the lead physiotherapist, the S&C coach and the nutritionist in the meeting designing collaborative programs. How can we minimize the time that this player is away? How can we minimize the detraining effect? And what interventions can we put into place which ensures that criteria-based rehabilitation process is done as quickly and as effectively as possible to get this player back on? That's a really good point.
The body fat stuff, when I was with England cricket, body fat was an injury prevention thing, particularly for fast bowlers. So you think about a fast bowler steaming in at whatever speed they're doing, they plant that standing foot and they bowl an over. Doing that multiple times a day over 5 days, and that's 10 times the body weight going through a standing foot every time they do it. So if you're carrying an unnecessary load, then you're increasing the stress. And then what you see in cricket, there's a lot of, at the time, there's lots of lumbar spine fractures and ankle injuries. So we did a lot of work on I look at body fat. I don't really call it body fat. My view is functional mass. So how functional is the mass? So forget fat. That becomes a measure of fatness. That's no interest to anyone. To me, it's how functional is that. So we then, in previous practice, I've looked at, all right, we've got the body composition, and you've got some kind of physical output metric that they've got. How is it comparing against that? Is it holding them back in any way, or is it fine? Maybe it's just them, but they're still functional. Can they still do a yo-yo test the next time? So if they can, then what's the problem? So it's all about how functional their mass is, and it's called context specific. to
Yeah.
the player and to the
I
sport
think
and to
that-
the demands.
I think that's one thing that the FA is really good at as well, is like sort of interdisciplinary team sort of idea where, you know, I'll sit in with a PPMN, physical performance medical nutrition meeting, where we'll all sit together and we'll go through, you know, the metrics, how, you know, it might be wellness, it might be the, you know, the speed, intense speed running, how much they've put, you know, during training or during a match. And we go through all those sorts of metrics. And then off the back of that, we can react. And especially in like a tournament setting, it's vital because we're getting all the information. And it's not just like, I'm the chef or that's the nutritionist. It is literally a multidisciplinary team who all come together and sort of discuss all aspects of it.
Do you know what's fascinating though is like your knowledge of it, Dave? Because without being disrespectful, people will just think of a chef as someone who just cooks the food, but your actual input into what you're being able to put into a player is so important. How long's it, or how have you felt your progress has changed from your time in the last sort of 5 years, learning about the game and what needs to go into it?
Yeah, so much. I mean, I guess, you know, one of the first conversations I had with Chris after I didn't get the job, one of the first times when we
Keeps on going back to that,
Not
Chris.
bitter. He's not bitter, is he?
one of the
Yeah,
first-
he's not letting that go, Chris.
No, I'm not letting it go. But one of the first things he said was like, I want us to be the most nutritionally prepared team in the world, which it's kind of obvious, you know, that's exactly what we want to be. But when it's sort of said to you and you feel like you can be a part of that, and then when you see that you're talking with the doc about people's sleep scores, you're talking with the S&C coach around, you know, the either hydration or the metrics or whatever, when you've got Chris as sort of the umbrella in the middle of it, who sort of pulls it all together and you feed back into him, it's just kind of an ever evolving sort of cycle where, you know, we're looking to get the 90% right, but then those little marginal gains that they can get as well, you know, it kind of inspires you and draws you on to do more. And, you know, you're already doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But if the S&C coach comes to me and says, you know, we need watermelon slushies for training, you know, because it'll help the lads push on for the tournament, then yeah, we're going there, aren't we?
Just to add as well, Dave's very curious. He'll always ask questions around. He'll challenge me and give me ideas. What about adding this? Why don't we add some turmeric in here for the anti-inflammation on these particular days? But they're clearly reading about this stuff. And that's where we have a good conversation. Then I can look at it and think, all right, what you thought about this? Science maybe says this, but then that's performance chef. That's what a performance chef is. It's not just the food for performance. It's actually how the contribution to that whole other 22 hours, if you like, because the common thread through it all is food.
Yeah.
You know, everything, sleep, the way you look at sleep, you know, all those things.
I just want to ask, before the conversation gets away from us, just to bring that back. You raised a really, really interesting point there, Dave, and Chris. I guess this is one that I would probably put towards you. How do you actually measure your effectiveness in terms of the structures and the nutritional protocols that you're putting into place in terms of? There's a lot of data coming into the game, and sometimes we can be swimming in data. But in terms of the effect that your nutrition is having with players and that you're delivering players, what do you see as key markers of that?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot. First and foremost, there's more that you can't measure than you can in nutrition. So it's being really clear on what you do want to measure that you think's actually telling you something that's true. Because you can measure some things that might tell you a false story. So I think for us, I've done it differently in different sports. So in sports where it's been an easy one, where there's been more of a body composition bias on looking at things, that's been a measure. So the fast bowlers, for example, if there's an outcome that, okay, players need to be more functional. So you look at functional mass and we're able to create a ratio, what's an optimal ratio where they want to be. Then over a period of time, you can plot that. That's a really easy, simple, clean measure. If a player is getting closer to this optimal ratio, then things are working. From a performance point of view, it's hard to measure. It's hard to measure football in performance directly to nutrition. It is hard, but we do look at various things. I'm really, for me, it starts on match day -1, looking at things like what I call fuel gap analysis. That's a measure. It can be done very detailed with individuals through weighing the food. So you can actually look to see, is there a gap? And then you can bridge that. That's a really, for me, one of the best analysis you can do, because that tells you something. Or for us, it doesn't end there. In-game fueling is really important for us. I'm not going to disclose too much about how we do that. We have a very deliberate blueprint, and we have a very detailed way of measuring if players are executing that, which we're able to look back and compare. Are we achieving are we hitting the outcome? What's X player doing, for example? So, but we have a narrow. You have a 10-day period of time. You've got to be strategic in what you can look at. So we kind of narrow our focus around that -1 in game, because we can do that really well. We can measure it to a degree, and we know it'll impact performance. How much it impacts performance, we can't quite measure, but if done well, this will impact performance. And what you've got to believe, this is what I get excited about as a nutritionist. I don't travel to all the tournaments. I go and help set things up, then I peel back, and then it gets handed over to the guys on the ground. But when you see a player in the 95th minute taking some fuel or an energy gel, for example, you've got to believe that that's made a difference.
Yeah.
Because you have to believe that. Otherwise, I don't think that, why are you doing it? And then you think of all the things that are put in place, or all the staff that are engaged in just getting that player to take that gel at that time. There's a role that is just played in that, and that takes a lot of work. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
That you can't measure that, but you've got to, you know that's helped.
Often people would say to me that food is always better than supplements. What would you say to that?
I mean, it depends again. So as Rossi said there, like for heavy adaptations, maybe beta-alanine might be required, for example. But I think we always do take the food first sort of policy. And if I can give them everything they need through food, then that's great. Obviously, there's certain things, for example, beetroot in the days leading up to a match, we want them to get the nitrates in from beetroot. Some players can't really tolerate it, don't like it, can't stand it, basically, and that's where a nitrate shot might come in. But I think the ideal is that, and I think Rossi will back me up here, is that we provide all the necessary food for them to have everything they need. So we will put beetroot on the menu, but if they can't have it or they won't have it, then we've also got a backup plan, which is the supplements.
It's food first, but it's not food always, because that's not real life.
Yeah.
That's not real life at all. So beta-alanine, yes, you'd have to eat a lot of turkey to get the levels of beta-alanine that you'd need to have any kind of adaptation. So that's where you have the supplement. Same with the beetroot, or the nitrates that you get from rhubarb that give you the kind of vasodilation effect. It's hard to get that. It's hard to get the volume of through the food. So that's where the supplements are really important. But it's the strategic use of the products that are key. That's the key. And all the food is broad. The menus are planned to be broad and balanced to provide everything that you need as the fundamental foundation. But it's the supplements are brought in as and when you need them. Or if you go into a country where the food quality might not be quite what you want it to be, that's where sports bars and the powders are an easy way to get some extra calories into people who might be struggling with the food.
I think they do go hand in hand as well, don't they? So, for example, the sports bars, sometimes there's room for a more substantial dessert to get some extra carbs in them. Not everyone's going to go for a bar, but sometimes there is, for an added snack, a bar is sometimes essential, and that's exactly what's needed. So I think they live hand in hand.
I was going to ask that in terms of tournaments and going to far-flung places of the earth. How do you actually go around sourcing ingredients and foods? How does that go around? And within that, second question, this is for Dave as well. How does it work in the hotels? Do you actually get a section of the hotel kitchen just to yourself, or are you supervising the hotel chefs preparing the food for the players? Just describe how that works.
Yeah, so I think in general, in terms of going to the hotels, the onus is on the hotel to provide the food. They, through their suppliers, I mean, I guess we go through certain hotel checks beforehand before we choose them as suitable hotels. And then I'll check with them, I'll liaise with the hotel. The onus is on the hotel to provide, but then that's where I'm there to hone in and deliver what our players expect and work with the hotel to perform. I can't go in and do, match. If I arrive one day before, I can't do match day minus one's meal, the desserts, then do breakfast, lunch, pre-match, post-match. It's impossible. So I need to lean on the hotels, and it's about onboarding them. It's about extensive, sending the menus in advance. Having a,
That's the key.
giving them room to showcase what they're about and letting them do things, but still working within our guidelines.
A pin badge goes a long way, doesn't it? Or a free shirt or some merch.
I mean,
Yeah.
this doesn't send too many of them out with us.
No, but just to echo that a bit there, like bringing the hotel into part of the process early is absolutely critical. Like we want them. There's a risk that we can go into their kitchen, and it's their kitchen, isn't it? Dave's got to go in there and function. My role as Dave's friend and line manager is that Dave goes into a great environment and can thrive. So we bring the particularly in a major tournament, we bring the host catering team into conversations right from the off. That could be 6-12 months out from the tournament, and then we're bouncing ideas from them, and we really encourage them to showcase some of their local cuisine as well, and we find a part of the menu. So then they're invested in it, and then what Dave tends to find that they can't do enough for you. So when you're trying to find something in the source ingredients, and back to your question, generally they can find stuff. We'll find alternatives, but we'll often take what they can't provide.
Where you go in the world, it's hard to have total control over what's sourced, but you can things you can control, and they're like the temperature in which the meat arrives. Is the ice machine clean? And I find that if you check the fridge temperatures, if you check the cleanliness, if you check the water supply is a clean water supply, if you go and check the ice machine, as I say, if you check all those things, you find that things fall into place. And if things start flagging up, then maybe you action things a bit more and delve deeper.
Yeah.
Chris, this is a question for you. For aspiring chefs, what are you looking for, and why did you hire Dave? What did you see in Dave that you didn't see in someone else, or what did you see differently to give him a different route?
Well, I didn't give him the job, did I? So
you didn't. You give him a different route.
Well, no, I mean, straight away, what struck me with Dave was real passion, but passion for performance. It stood out a mile in his interview. He was even to the point where we have a system at work down the pathway called food formations. It's a simple way of periodizing fuel on your plate. Dave even knew information about that. So he was really invested in the performance side and enthusiastic about it. That's really important. So it's enthusiasm for performance and to want to make a difference and to believe you can make a difference. They've got to be a really kind of political operator, shrewd operator to read the room. They've got to go into many different environments and deliver high quality every time without compromise. So with that, they've got to be able to read the room and be able to flex the style. Dave does that brilliantly. But not only that, make a kitchen work with him. And also be quite autonomous, believe it or not. You need these chefs to be autonomous and have a little bit of scope and freedom to do things that they think is right as well. So I give Dave full autonomy to go and plan a menu, and it's my job to critique it. But if you get those three, and that's what Dave does great. And all my chefs, to be honest, I've got five great chefs, and I could have described any one of them there. That's what you're looking for. And I do think they're quite a unique skills. They're quite a unique set of characteristics for a chef.
Dave, could you just give us an outline of any chefs who are listening, how difficult your job is? Because obviously you spend large periods of time away, and when we met at the England under-21s, you literally had half an hour, didn't you, just to pop out because your day is so busy. So it's not very easy what you do, is it?
No, I think obviously it takes hard yards and, it's taken years of experience to be able to go into any kitchen around the world and be able to hold your own. It takes a bit of experience, and there's no real fast track for that. You've just got to put the hard yards in. But also as well, there's better chefs out there than me, hands down. But you've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, going into another kitchen and sort of, things aren't always going to be exactly how you want them, but it's gauging when to push, when to pull. If I go into a kitchen and just start barking and shouting and screaming, which I have done before, by the way, as well, if it's, if necessary, but that's a quick way to lose people. So you've kind of got to, you can't be too soft where you accept anything, because fundamentally you need to provide the lads with exactly what they need. So there's no compromise there, but you've got to do it in a way where you get buy-in from them and you get them on board with you, and then we all push together. And I think that's the best way that I've found.
And ultimately, someone like myself, I need to know if Dave's in Albania and there's problems, he'll sort it. That's so important that I just know I've got a level of confidence that Dave will sort this and he'll find a way.
I've had a chef before, and it wasn't even, we weren't shouting at each other, nothing really. It stemmed from nowhere, but he threw something at the wall, walked out, and it was Matchday -1, and my team need fueling. Ultimately, that's on me now. So I've got to get the job done. I can't turn around and say everyone's gone home. It's on, there's no food tonight. Yeah. They need to, there's a match tomorrow. So I guess when the shit hits the fan, you've got to pull it out, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Dave, one of the things I was going to ask you, and you just mentioned it there, you need to make sure that the players are getting everything that they need to perform. How do you go around delivering food to players with different cultural or religious backgrounds? Or I'm thinking particularly a good example is in and around Ramadan. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so obviously beforehand, again, pre-camp comms is so important. If you ditch something on a hotel last minute, then it's a surefire way to start creating negativity and a cycle. So for me, it's about being aware of these times, these potential pinch points, like, is a player having Ramadan? Okay, on Ramadan, sorry. So, what can we do for them? And it's about communicating with them, communicating with the hotel. And it might be that we put a fridge in the room and send almost like a sort of a pre-made packed lunch style meal to their room for them to have it. Or maybe it might be that we communicate with room service and send something hot for them. And again, that's about what the player needs as well as what the hotel can supply. And it's just gauging it really. But, for me, the players' needs are the most important thing. And if I have to get out of bed at 4:00 in the morning to provide food, no problem,
Brilliant. I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned on nutrition, which I think is quite important to probably a lot of people who listen to the podcast, is alcohol, and where you sit with alcohol and what it does to performance and how it impacts it. Chris, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think you struggle to find any evidence to say it supports performance. There's plenty to say.
Absolutely.
And I think, again, looking at it technically, it just dampens down the adaptation. After any kind of match or stimulus, the body's highly active, it's highly sensitive, and it's desperately trying to repair itself, isn't it? That's fundamentally what it's trying to do. So within that window of time, 2, 4, 6, 8 hours, where the body's still repairing, even 24 hours, the interference of alcohol is just going to slow down the recovery. That's as simple as that. It can have a diuretic effect, so it can interfere with hydration. So everything that you're trying to do for all these supplements and strategies around food and good nutrition can be, you're almost pushing back in the presence of alcohol. But it's also culturally, my time in cricket is a big part of the sport. Someone scores 100 and they're out in India and it's ridiculously hot. First thing you do in the dressing room, you all toast it with a beer or a glass of wine or something. So there's cultural things. So last thing I would do in there, so I don't think you should be having that. It's getting that right. But yeah, it doesn't help performance. And that comes down to education and individuals' life choices, I think.
Yeah, I suppose one of the challenges that you have, Chris, is players. I suppose everyone comes to you with a preconceived idea of what nutrition looks like from experiences I've had. One of you mentioned about things that people mentioned to you in the early part of your career. And there's a lot of conflicting information out there in the public domain, influencers and this kind of thing. How do you manage players that perhaps come with ideas around nutrition which don't perhaps fit, not necessarily with your own ideas, but would actively sort of detract from their performance?
Well, I'm lucky. It's not happened a lot in my career, but a couple of years ago, there's a lot of players wanting to move to vegan diets through documentaries that they'd seen, and that came at me a lot. So I think at first, this is where again you've got a relationship to preserve initially. So you've certainly got to listen to a player, and I think you've got to be quite. I would be quite careful with how I would approach something like that. And let's say, for example, if they want to go to a vegan diet, my approach would be: you look at it, try anything you want. But I'd say what I think the consideration is that it's significantly harder to get the level of protein that you need through a vegan diet than an animal-based diet. So I said, so what you need to think about that. How you're going to do that? Have you thought about the different sources? In the amino acid profile of plant-based food, you've got to get different combinations to try and to get the complete profile. So what you find, you talk them through that, and then you try and facilitate it, and you make a few changes in the menu, and then over time, what I found, it doesn't tend to last. So maybe the next camp they've reverted back to standard diet. But I think you've got a duty to listen to them. If it's totally off the charts and wacky, of course you've got a duty of care to advise them. But I think something like switching to a vegan diet, I think it's your job to work with them on that.
Yeah. I think we'll look to wrap it up, but the only thing I would just ask both of you, so if we start with Dave first, is the job as satisfying as it is sounded on this podcast? Because after listening to your passion for what you do and almost what you're getting out of it, do you just look forward to working all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I've got family, and I love being at home with my family. And I think this is the beauty as well of international football, where, I get to be in and out. And then when I'm in, I'm all in, and I literally can't wait. So you're putting the players in the best possible position to perform. You're in a group. It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. And I do love my job. I also love family time as well. But yeah, I love my job.
What about you, Chris? Are you getting the satisfaction that obviously you set out on a different path as a youngster, and then you've gone into nutrition, and it just feels at the moment more so than ever that nutrition's getting talked about more than anything. And one of the things that we were desperately trying to do with this podcast is show what goes in behind the scenes, which is so important to make sure that these players are performing at the highest level.
Yeah, I mean, I do love what I do. I think having had a job in my old career, I don't really consider this work per se. It's nothing like that. Nothing like crawling around a loft throwing cables in. Now that's work.
Yeah.
What I love about nutrition, and I love football nutrition. That's what I'm brought up as football. I played it all my life. I coach it now in Sheffield. I love the strategic challenge of fueling, say, a tournament or footballers. I love that. And the whole logistics of it. It's not necessarily just what the player's eating. It's the whole we're talking about before. Looking at the hotel, what the challenge is there. How are we gonna overcome that? And then you build that up. I love the strategic challenge of that. And then you look at the tournament. Okay, you've got 7 games or 8 games at the next World Cup. The challenge of all the flights and all the different elements around that interfere with just the basics of eating 3 to 5 meals a day. I love the strategic challenge of that, and working with the performance staff and Dave to put things in place, and then seeing that kind of the in-game nutrition fueling, and it's very, very satisfying. I love strategy. I love that, and I love that side of it, and that's what keeps me really excited still.
Chris, can I just ask really quickly? You've mentioned that you did your coaching badges right at the start. Do you think that's helped you in terms of being a nutritionist?
For me, without a doubt. I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, it underpins everything that I do. I mean, my doctorate was around that, really. I was looking at kind of what an effective nutritionist looks like. I looked at me and I thought, very unconventional background. So, and I've been in these roles, high-level roles, really. Look back, I mean, very, very fortunate, and but to stay in these roles, and I had no thought, what is it, that I've been able. And I look back how when I moved into from coaching into nutrition, what the principles I taught, I was taught through coaching, like build rapport quickly, flex your style, think in the now, be clear and concise, demonstrate well, be a role model, be an actor, kind of get in and get out. These are cues you've probably heard all the time. I definitely took that into my coaching work. And I used to always say, where I was teaching a 7-year-old the Cruyff turn, or an established England cricketer how to get more protein into the diet, I saw the process the same. There's an element of see what they can do, show them, teach them, and then hopefully just go and do it on their own. That's the same as teaching a player the Cruyff turn, or seeing them doing it on the pitch. So, but then also have that interaction, understanding like an environment, a group of people, and knowing that all 26 people in that room are going to speak to them differently. I manage a men's team now, transferable skills. And I believe for me, it's been absolutely massive, because I didn't have any formal, behavioral coaching training at all through my degree or anything like that. I relied on my intuition and what I did well as a coach of children back in the day.
Superb. Right, Chris, Dave, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Strain on the Game. Hopefully it's been insightful to our viewers, our listeners. It certainly has for me. I'm sure it has been for Adrian as well. That has been another episode of Strain on the Game. Follow us on social media and YouTube at Strain on the Game. Subscribe, like, and follow.